Hey all, this is Siege, and today I want to talk about what I'm hoping Destiny 2 can, or more importantly did learn from the Mass Effect Andromeda debacle that many of us were faced with when playing the game at launch, specifically the extremely unfinished feel of the game.
You're for real, huh?
Yeah, I am. What's wrong with your face? First, let me say that I realize the patches Andromeda's applied to the game have fixed a great many issues, but that's specifically why I want to discuss it. As always, if you enjoy the video, please consider liking and more importantly sharing it, as I feel it's a problem that is not only becoming more and more prevalent, but strangely enough, it seems like it's being tolerated and almost expected from launch titles. Personally, I can't understand why. Mass Effect Andromeda for me was a title I couldn't wait to get my hands on. Considering how well the original trilogy was put together, the incredible story, and the increasingly better gameplay as the series went on, it showed me a real commitment to all aspects of the game. Its story, its immersion, its core mechanics, and especially in the third game, its actual gameplay. Many consider this as one of the best gaming franchises ever, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support that claim, even if you don't necessarily agree. Even the controversial ending of the series, one that still hasn't been definitively decided upon, was something that really struck a chord with gamers because they cared so much about it. Now, for the record, I can't personally see how the indoctrination theory, even with the DLC's endings added in, isn't the actual ending, as it just makes too much sense. Let me clarify. Much like the clever noob's theory suggests, I'll leave a link in the description, I don't think Shepard was indoctrinated, merely that the ending was the Reaper's final attempt to indoctrinate Shepard. And now that it's been announced that Mass Effect Andromeda has been put on hiatus due to the overwhelmingly negative response of the game, it could potentially open the door for a proper ending to that series. Now, Andromeda currently carries a 4.8 user score across platforms respectively, so even if you personally love it, understand that the vast majority of players don't necessarily agree with that sentiment, or if nothing else, were severely disappointed in it, myself included. And on that note, I can't understand how day one players were able to slog through it. The facial animations were absurd. The story, at least for the first 5 or 6 hours of the game, is boring and tedious. The game itself was full of weird glitches and bugs, some of which still need to be addressed, and has had 3 major patches less than 2 months after its release, not even taking into consideration the early access patch. I personally just can't ignore all that. It's interesting to note that BioWare went on record to state that even after the early negative backlash, they had no initial plans to fix said animations, but then promptly pushed out one, most likely as damage control to save face. That last part is probably the most alarming, as anyone who did play it from day one may have asked themselves if BioWare even employed a Q&A department, given the sheer number of problems they were encountering. I'm not sure I've played a more unfinished major release, and to me it felt like either the developers were looking at a cash grab or just didn't have the time to finish the game before its launch date. Either of those scenarios are unacceptable in my opinion, and seem to speak to the same issue, which is money. Let me state that I realize it costs a lot of money for the type of game we're seeing nowadays. The quality and quantity of content is getting more and more spectacular, and that doesn't come cheap. However, I believe the old and seemingly dying motto goes something like, anything worth doing is worth doing right. And that's where I think this game failed the hardest. My question is, do the developers really care about it? Or maybe we even the bigger issue here? Pre-ordering games used to be a partnership between gamer and developer, as we the gamers put our faith in the developers that they would make good on their promises for a well-made, polished game, and in turn, we would reward them with guaranteed revenue before the game even released, usually months before it hit the shelves. The idea that they could confidently work on those games knowing the return would already be in the bank, something most business owners offering a product never get the luxury of knowing definitively up front, was essentially that pact between us and them. Honestly, when was the last time you pre-ordered an oil filter before getting an oil change, or pre-ordered a new type of bread at the grocery store? Ever pre-ordered a pair of pants? The point is, these pre-orders were based on years of a trust that was developed, and now, at least in Andromeda's case, that trust is broken for a large percentage of the player base. I think it's very safe to assume that if Mass Effect is resurrected and the story doesn't relate directly to Shepard, fans will be much more cautious about offering their money up to an Andromeda sequel. Partly due to this, as well as the wholly uninspired story Andromeda has begun to tell, which of course will keep shareholders from endorsing products that actually take a chance on something new. I think that is a much bigger issue altogether, as seen in movies like The Force Awakens, Ghostbusters, and the myriad of other new projects that are pretty much carbon copies of their predecessors with different casts. It seems like originality is becoming harder and harder to find, and I believe this is why. But honestly, that's a story for another video altogether. So what does this have to do with Destiny, you might be asking? Well, friends, I believe Destiny to be the progenitor of this thought process, or at least one of the first major offenders of it, as most who have played from the beginning know how poorly the story was and continues to be portrayed, the bland and repetitive mission design, and even the loot systems. For those that don't remember, engrams used to frequently decrypt at levels lower than what they were, with purples commonly decrypting as blues or even greens. This was something that had to be fixed in one of the game's first patches. Bosses in Destiny, say at the end of strikes and such, didn't even drop loot, and buying legendary weapons required hours and hours of gameplay to get. And even then, the legendary weapons look basically the same as the rare variant. The mission design and storyline, however, are somehow worse, in that each mission is essentially a section of the open world environment made to appear linear, with bland dialogue essentially describing what the player themselves is already experiencing, with little to no explanation as to why they're there, what they're doing, and even what's going on in the world as a whole, a theme that actually continues throughout the entirety of the Destiny 1 experience. There's no emotional ties to any of the characters, as they're all pretty forgettable to begin with, and character development isn't even approached until the Taken King. Let me ask you, from the game, what do you know about this guy? How about her? How about him? What about this character? How about this supposedly important AI? What exactly do we know about anything other than this big bad guy was messing with the universe, and after millennia of conquering the galaxy, a team of 6 of us were able to take him down and kill him for good? The only way to really learn about any of this is to leave the game and read through Grimoire cards that may or may not even be tied to the game in its current iteration, as it's entirely possible many of them were based around the story that was replaced leading up to launch due to disagreements in what the story in the game would eventually become. Thankfully, a community of YouTubers were able to come together and flesh out what appears to be a pretty interesting story. Of course, is it? If you look online now, pretty much everybody is doing lore and speculation videos, with theories ranging from pretty plausible scenarios to completely insane ones. None of it can be discounted, though, because nothing is concrete in the Grimoire. It's all cryptic and based highly on perspective, which will vary from person to person depending on their own innate bias. You know what I'm worried about? I'm worried that Destiny 1 spent years getting the formula somewhat right, making loot rewarding and a leveling system that, although it still could be tweaked, mind you, is now pretty good and allows you to somewhat customize your character. But because they need to change it all to build a new game due to an oversight in the difficulty in producing content from the original engine, who's to say we're not going to be in the same boat we were at launch at Destiny 1? We don't know how loot will be given, so it's entirely possible that that will be broken. We might not be able to customize our player's armor. We have no clue what the new leveling system will be. And the fact that they are completely going away from a system they worked so hard on, well, they have as much of a chance of getting it wrong again as they do right. What's really frightening is that the model looks identical to Destiny 1, with a base game followed up right away with 2 expansion packs. Does this look familiar to you? Should we brace ourselves for another story cut into pieces again? Will Destiny even tell a coherent story? Or will we have to wait until September of 2018 before we get the full Destiny 2 story? Now, if you say I'm crazy, you're just not paying attention. History tends to repeat itself, and given that Destiny 1 was somehow able to survive with all these problems baked into it, There's no reason to think Bungie doesn't have the capacity, or at least be satisfied, with the same thing for Destiny 2. Destiny 2 pre-orders are already showing to be just as successful as the first one. So, they have your money already. In my case, $100 of it, because of the stupid channel I decided to start. Otherwise, there's no way I would have pre-ordered this game. Here's what I will tell you though, and you can quote me on this. If Destiny 2 comes out the same way Destiny 1 did, I'm done. I'm completely done. I think I've made mention of that in another video of mine. Either I'm going to go a completely different route with the channel altogether, or I'll just shut it down. And you might say to yourself, who cares? Your channel is small and no one will miss it. Well, you're probably right, but I will, because I put a ton of my own time and effort into it, and attempted to always put out a high quality product for people to enjoy. Now, no matter what your personal opinion is, that's the truth of the matter. I need more than what the gaming industry seems to think is okay, and I'm not going to be part of the problem again. I want to see a game at launch that is finished, that seems like it was actually put through some type of Q&A process. If they want to turn my lifelong love of gaming into a full-blown corporate industry, there's nothing I can do about that. But I'm going to start addressing it as such then. It needs to be high quality the whole way around, not just in certain facets and promised patches and fixes to fix glaring oversights after launch that shouldn't really be tolerated by any of us. It's our hard-earned money that they're playing with, so they need to earn it just like we did. The game isn't finished. I don't care about your stupid shareholders or quarterly numbers that need to be hit. Finish the game, or don't put it out, and if it hurts your bottom line, then too damn bad. That's on you, not on us. We as gamers need to look at it this way too, or the level of quality will continue to drop as the years go on, as they're only going to do enough to make that money. They don't care about you or your experience or even if you enjoy the game, so long as you buy it. And if you believe differently than that, as I mentioned before, you're just not paying attention. And that is dangerous to all of us and the industry as a whole. Make them accountable. It could very well change the course of gaming forever, depending on how we as a community of gamers approach it. And we need everybody on board for this. So take care all, and please keep this in mind as we see the gameplay premiere this week. You as the individual gamer are way more important than you possibly know. I'll see you after the premiere. Bye.